Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning, and a happy Sunday morning to all of you who are joining us this morning for Faith in Our Hometown. We thank you for joining us, whether this is your first time or whether you're a return viewer. But we're happy that you spend some of your Sunday mornings thinking about how to make Joplin and our larger community, Carthage, Webb City, Pittsburgh, all those areas a better place, because we are the people who live in that community and try to make a better place with all of our neighbors in our hometowns. This morning we're going to talk about the subject of homelessness. And we're going to talk about it specifically as it kind of looks here in the greater Joplin area. But we are going to talk about homelessness, and we're going to talk about how some of our neighbors get this way and what we are doing as a community to try to solve some of those issues and to help some of our neighbors who wind up without a home. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and we'll be right back here to talk about homelessness and here in our area.
In Ireland, the first Sisters of Mercy were called the Walking Sisters because every day they went out in search of women and children who needed healing or help. Mercy continues to answer the same call, dedicated to the health of every woman who comes to us for care. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy. A new baby changes the world and each of us. The Sisters of Mercy devoted themselves to offering exceptional maternity and delivery care, training generations of nurses to do the same. Mercy continues to answer the same call, to not only care for your baby, but to cherish them too. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy.
Well, again, thanks for being with us for another Sunday morning for Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning is Tammy Walker, who works for the Economic Security Corporation. She's the Director of Community Development there, and she is one of the people that works on our Homeless Coalition here in our area. So Tammy, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do, and then we're going to talk about homelessness here in the Joplin area.
I've worked for Economic Security for 22 years, and all of those years we've been working with the local Homeless Coalition, who's been around for, since the 80s. Okay. So we're a group of providers and interested, citizens that work around the issues of homelessness for housing and services for our Jasper and Newton County area.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, part of most religious organizations, a background. Certainly, the commercials everybody just saw with the Sisters of Mercy and how they got started was exactly that. They would kind of like wander looking for folks who, who were on the streets and some of those kinds of things. So it's a mission that was very near and dear to our hearts. You've been kind of the one at Economic Security that's been working in this area. So let's just talk a little bit about who are the homeless here in Joplin? Where'd they come from? Who are they? How'd you find out about them? All those things.
Well, on any given night in the two-county area, Jasper and Newton County, there are approximately 275 people who are either sheltered, living in emergency shelter or transitional housing program, or out on the street.
So name some of those shelters, because we've worked with some of those people and had some of them on our show, but who are some of the larger shelters that we know?
In Joplin, you have Souls Harbor, Water Gardens, Children's Haven, the Carthage Crisis Center, the Restoration Life in Neosho, and then there are a couple of transitional housing facilities. We have one, and the House Incorporated is a large one.
So you say that some of those folks are housed in those. So how many on a given night would be housed in all those institutions together?
Emergency shelter and transitional housing, about 220, with about 55 living out on the street.
So we got about 55 people who are actually out there with no roof over their head.
Correct, and it's probably higher than that. When we do our annual point in time count, and we do that the last week of January every year, and the whole state counts at one time, so we're all doing it on the same day. We go out and try to survey and find people who are living outside in the woods or are going to different social service agencies to try to get services or meals, and we try to find them to find out who they are, what services they're connected to, what services do they need to be connected to.
Sure.
So we know that we are probably missing some folks, but
that's a good estimate.
yes.
And I think it's just important for our viewers to kind of like know what's happening out there, because we'll talk about it, but sometimes we don't give it any shape. We don't give it any number. So we really think we got about 220 that get housed most of the time, but there's about 50 or so that are falling through the cracks and who are out in the woods or living. So where do these folks live? I mean, you say out in the woods. So I mean, just some of the unincorporated areas that are just not populated.
Sure. I mean, there are some slightly wooded areas around some railroad tracks locally. There's some known locations,
right?
And we know where they're at, and they.
And so do they. And that's the network. Yeah.
Yes, and so we go out to visit with them. But there are probably abandoned buildings. There are people that live in their cars, in parks, that camp when, you don't really camp during January. So they're a little bit of, everywhere.
Yeah, and this is one of those things. I mean, and I'll just give it a little anecdotal evidence. We've had people who've been living on the streets, who come. For example, they'll come and pray with us on a Wednesday morning because we get coffee and donuts.
Yes.
Okay, which is great. I mean, we feed whoever come. We did. If they come and with us on a Wednesday morning, they just come and down and have some coffee and donuts. So we've gotten to know sometimes some of these folks who have lived on the streets, and only after we figured out that they were living on the streets, because you didn't even know all that at the very beginning. Then one of our folks befriends them and then starts talking to them, and fortunately, we've hooked them up with agencies like yours, so that some of those folks are no longer on the streets, but actually are living in a home now, which is wonderful. And that's the way we want it to work. And I'm sure St. Peter's is no exception, but we just happen to be in the downtown area, so sometimes those folks find us. But they're all over the place, and and they wander into all of our places from time to time, all of our places of worship. And so, how do we encounter them, and what do we do with them?
Correct. Yeah. And that's what the Homeless Coalition really tries to do, is we're all a connected network so that we can refer people to the correct places. We have what we call Housing Connect, which is a coordinated access, assessment, referral, and housing placement system. So all of the local providers that have housing resources that will only serve literally homeless people, we all work with folks that go through Housing Connect. They're assessed, they're prioritized based on their needs, and locally we've decided to serve the most vulnerable, the people that have been homeless the longest, the ones that are using the most resources like emergency rooms and facilities and care. So we fill our openings in those housing programs through Housing Connect. When we have an opening, we ask for another referral so that we're moving people through that system more quickly and placing them in a housing situation that they want to be in, the type of housing and where they want to live. That's really important too.
Yeah, so how do we fix some of that? So why do people become homeless? What have you found out? Tell us the stories of some of the people that you've been meeting out on the streets.
It's not just one reason. A lot of people tend to think they want to be homeless and they're living outside because they want to. Well, there, of course, are some people who don't want to be connected, that aren't ready to house. They're not uncomfortable enough with their situation to change it. But for some, with our agency, we served a family that was homeless due to domestic violence. She and her 4 kids were homeless. We helped them through our transitional housing program, helped her get on her feet, connected her with resources. She went back to school, got a job, and she recently graduated with her RN and is making more money than me, and is very stable.
You shouldn't have gone into social work if you wanted to make money, and you know that. You know that we all we wind up in those situations sometimes because it's really kind of a calling. We just think that's what we're supposed to be doing. But yeah, that's why I always laugh when my students tell me that they're going to be social work majors, and I'm like, oh, and you'll be poor.
Yes.
Just like, it's okay. All right.
But domestic violence is one reason. Some people will fall into homelessness because they get behind on their rent and they're evicted. The basic needs and wages are not, rising with the cost of living. And for a family to rent a 2-bedroom in Missouri, they'd have to make $15.46 an hour, Or
on a 40-hour, based on a 40-hour work week.
yes,
Okay.
or if they were at a minimum wage job, they'd have to work 76 hours a week.
And in a single parent household,
correct. And
if you work 76 hours a week in order to, be in that kind of a housing market, you're suddenly, who's going to take care of your kids?
correct. And a lot of families we encounter don't have a support system, or just one positive person in their life to help them. And there are a number of folks that are suffering from untreated mental illnesses or substance abuse issues, and that right there, will.
Yeah. And again, it doesn't take very long for some of those dominoes to fall in some of those people's lives that would suddenly put them on the streets. I banged that drum many times on this show about the fact that we're, if I think it. Again, this is one of my soapboxes. I think if we did a better job taking care of the mentally ill and did a better job supporting them, we'd have fewer people on the streets, and them more able to manage their lives with a little bit of assistance along the way. Yeah, but it's very difficult.
I agree. And when we do engage these families who have those issues, we don't wait until they're, fixed before we house them. We house them, and then we add the support services and case management services and try to engage them and what do they need next? Have they applied for, food stamps if that's what they need? Have they applied for their disability, which is a very daunting task for anybody to do. So having someone to help them do that, just get connected and stabilized in their housing, and, they are more likely to be able to stay there then.
Yeah, and again, sometimes I am just amazed, sometimes how difficult it is for me to deal with insurance and medicines and all that stuff over the phone. I mean, and I've got degrees, I've got, some skills in some areas, but I'll tell you what, you get wrapped up in all that stuff, it's really kind of easy to, to lose heart and get frustrated and do all that stuff. And sometimes it's just the support that you need in order to wade your way through the system, to get yourself going. And again, these are not people that are necessarily looking for, everything for free, but they're people that weren't able to keep all the pieces glued together for whatever reason. So again, so you've encountered some of these people. Like, say for example, how many people do we know? Just out of curiosity, about some of the success stories. Who are some of the? How many people do we know that we've actually been able to get off the streets, if you will, or out of the woods, and into permanent housing in the last year?
Well, with Housing Connect, that's just an ongoing process. We always have people coming in to get assessed, to figure out, what kind of housing they need. We can only house someone when a housing opening becomes available, so some people are waiting. But since January, probably close to about 178 we've been able to filter through that assessment system and actually get into housing. But that's happening daily. I mean, the housing programs can have openings, people can move on into a different type of housing or the area.
That's what we want with those emergency shelters and those folks that are providing them. All of the agencies that we're talking about really feel excited when they can move somebody on to the next step and on to the next stage. Not because we want to get rid of them, but because we know that they're starting to succeed and make it. All right. My guest this morning is Tammy Walker, who works with Economic Security. We've been talking about the homeless. And we are going to be right back after a quick break. So you might want to warm up that coffee or get yourself going or call your neighbor and tell them to tune in that you like the show or whatever you happen to need to do. But we'll be right back. This is Faith in Our Hometown. So don't go away and stay tuned.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
So again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Your Faith in Our Hometown. Our topic this morning has been homelessness here in our area. And my guest is Tammy Walker from Economic Security Corporation. She's the Director of Community Development, and we've been talking about what our situation is and who are the people who are the homeless in our area. And so what can we do to make, I know we're doing it in individual lives, but what can we as a community do to assist this and make it a better situation?
There's a lot of things that people can do. They can plug in a number of ways. If you're truly interested in, looking at homelessness in our community, you could join the Homeless Coalition. We meet the second Monday of every month, and anybody can join and come and look at the issues that we're dealing with and help problem solve and plan. So that's one way. We have a number of different events that we do throughout the year where we go out in January and do a point in time count where we actually go out and engage with people, survey them, find out what their needs are. And it helps us figure out what our gaps are in our community. So if you ever wanted to go out on a count, that is another way to become involved. We also do a Project Homeless Connect event. It's like a one-stop shop event that we host in January and in July, and it's to draw people in, and we have a lot of unsheltered people come in, and we have businesses and healthcare services available, housing services, you name it, we have it, and it's another way for us to engage with them and maybe engage them in a service that day, so helping with that event. We're always looking for employers to give somebody a second chance for employment. We're always looking for landlords who are willing to give a person another chance. So we have a number of housing providers that are trying to serve people that might not have a very good rental history. So having someone that might, give a person a chance and rent to them, we're always looking for those landlords. And we have a number of different people that we're serving. We have a fairly large veteran population because the House Incorporated serves a large number of veterans. So if veterans are on your heart and you want to serve someone, then, we'd love to visit with you as well. Time, treasure, and talent is kind of what I go back to. There are a number of homeless providers, emergency shelters, transitional housing programs that always need volunteers. There's always looking for donations of goods or even funding.
Sure.
So there's so many different ways that somebody could become involved if they wanted to be.
And again, as we said, we roughly have 275 people in the community at any one point in time that are homeless, and there are a lot of different organizations out there,
yes,
making their attempt to try to move these folks into a more secure place in life where they can provide for themselves and provide for their families and do what it needs to be done in order to do that. Yeah. In terms of you just finished Hunger and Homelessness Week, I know, a couple weeks ago, which is one of the, one of those awareness things. What else do we need to do in the community to raise anybody's awareness of what's going on?
Well, being aware that we do have homeless people, and they're not just, singles. Single individuals are the highest group or the largest number of people in our area that are homeless, but we do have families. And children. Occasionally, we have children that are homeless living outside, which is terrible to think about. So knowing that we have, neighbors that need our help, that there are ways that people can get involved. We try to, as the Homeless Coalition, do a number of education issues of, this is what's happening. There's always things about, criminalization of homelessness. I know there's been talk about the loitering, being an issue, but where are people going to go? So just
has that been a tension that I'm unaware of here in the Joplin area? Because that one I've not.
Well, panhandling has come up. Before.
Yeah.
And I don't know that particularly passed, but that, has been an issue.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me when you do see somebody like that, I'm just so aware that there are, there's no way to verify any of that. That's,
right.
That's one of the reasons why, I don't usually give to somebody who's panhandling. But I mean, if they're saying that if they've got a sign that says I'm hungry, I know where they can get I know where they can come eat. I mean, I know where we can meet some of those needs that day. And of course, I would like to, if they are, if they're willing to engage me in the conversation, I can ask a few more questions and then, suggest somebody who might be able to help them out of their situation. Now, I know they're working hard to do it that way, but that's not going to last.
Right.
They're not going to be, unless they're really, really good at panhandling, and some people are. So I always chuckle because some people say, well, these people just need to work. And I'm like, well, they're working. Can't you see it? I mean, and they are. They're doing it their own way. But I'm just saying, but I mean, that's not a permanent solution. I mean, getting folks, employed and, in gainful employment and having a roof over their head and all those are the kinds of things that I think are going to make a more lasting, solution rather than just somebody giving doing a handout or whatever.
Right. And I always promote giving information out and where they can plug in. I do often hear about people saying, they just need to get a job. We do have a, fairly large number of people that are living outside, and the logistics of trying to get a job when you're staying outside, I'm not sure everybody thinks about that. So where are they going to shower, number one? If they're living outside, they probably don't have a car. So transportation is going to be more challenging for them, as well as where are they going to store their stuff when they go to work or an interview. And then it just goes on. And if they aren't employed, they probably don't have funds for food. So just saying get a job, for somebody that's living outside, it's considerably more difficult. So we take the approach of trying to house an individual and then work on, the employment and all the other services to stabilize them. So it's difficult for people. They have far more barriers than somebody that might, be housed.
Well, and I think those of us without barriers sometimes lose sight of that. I mean, I just, I think we lose sight of all the different things that we take for granted, like the shower, like the car. And even if they're not great showers or great car, we've those of us who have them.
Right.
And so that makes it a little bit more difficult again to find a job and and to hold it. If again, some of those folks that maybe on medications or things like that, how do they stay on those medications? How do they do those things that are going to help them to be able to maybe perhaps keep that job or do whatever they need to do? And again, I just think that sometimes it's very, I just always caution people, it's very hard sometimes for those of us who are in the positions of having things to understand exactly what it's like to not have, There's one religious group, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there's one religious group that who is part of their thing. Now, they know it's only a temporary thing, but just so that they teach them what some of that's like, they've got to go do this 2-week or month-long thing where they just go and figure out, they get dropped off somewhere and say, you got to figure out how you're going to live and do all that stuff. And so, sometimes they'll wind up at shelters, sometimes they'll go and introduce themselves as belonging to that group and people will be kind or do whatever, but it's like, the things they learn in the middle of that, about how to, kind of survive and what other people go through. They just have a tendency never to take it quite for granted like that ever again. Because again, when you've got it, you don't realize how difficult it is for somebody who doesn't.
Yes, I agree with that. We used to do an activity, it's been many years ago, but one of our awareness activities was sleeping outside in the park. In October, usually in a box or a sleeping bag, but not in a tent. And it's eye-opening.
We used to do that on college campuses too.
Yes.
Just again to raise awareness. And I mean, and again, it's like I say to students, stay in school and you will never be part of the underclass of society. You may not be rich, but you'll always have a voice. And you'll always be connected. You'll always do those kinds of things again. But then what happens when one of them becomes ill? Or what happens if they've, just got an entry-level job and all of a sudden they didn't have any insurance and they suddenly, are wiped out. And then, and all of a sudden whatever they worked for is now suddenly gone. And it's like, it's just, life is more fragile than many of us like to think about.
Well, there's a lot of families that are, living on the edge. They're just a paycheck away from getting an eviction notice and, having a landlord not, be able to work with them. And that's what we do at our particular agency. Our services are for low income and homeless. So we see the gamut. A lot of lower income folks are working, and we don't, just have, programs that are deemed handouts or whatever. These are folks that are just scraping by, but still need that little bit of assistance, to make ends meet with our budget.
Yeah, and and again, I'll get on a different soapbox here, but I think, I was talking to somebody the other day that that was saying the fact that, it's like they had 2 job interviews lined up and they were getting ready to go to the job interview, but they knew that the entry level pay in those jobs, which they were qualified for, because they weren't qualified for the other, they just said they were making more on unemployment than they would when they actually got the job. Well, there's something wrong with the system when that's it, because how is anybody going to be motivated to get a job and to keep a job when you can make more money, dipping into the system? I mean, there's no, we got to get some of this stuff tweaked a little bit.
Yeah, that's called the cliff effect, and it happens. You have to decide whether you're going to take that little bit of raise and, with your job, and you might lose your, child care subsidy. And child care is very expensive. Yeah. So you might lose that little bit of benefit. And some people pass up the raise because it doesn't work with their budget, and that is sad. Yeah.
Well, we were talking this morning about homelessness, and again, we're not going to solve it here on a Sunday morning, but I hope that we're at least raising enough awareness. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Stick around for a wrap-up.
I was in shock, and in denial, and I couldn't believe it was me. I was healthy, feeling well, but unbeknownst to me, after the colonoscopy, I found out that I had colon cancer. My name is Mario Guerrero. I'm an ethicist. I help people that are in a hospital and the medical staff process some of the difficult situations. In this case, it was the other way around.
Well, I'm glad they caught it earlier.
On my 50th birthday, I had a regular checkup. I wasn't concerned because I felt well. No family history of this type of cancer, and yet I developed this type of cancer. During the process of the colonoscopy, they were able to remove that polyp. And having that done within the hospital setting, they can just address all the issues right there and then. I'm a great believer in early detection. This is such a silent disease, and you really don't necessarily have symptoms. Go get checked. Follow up with your physician. Don't wait.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. Again, we do a lot of shows where we just really are trying to raise our awareness of who some of our neighbors are. And sometimes we notice some of these folks who might be wandering the streets, and some of them might be homeless. I think it's important for us to know that there are probably about 275 homeless people in town on a given day. We're blessed to have so many other people in town who care, because there are lots of people doing lots of good work out there trying to reach out and take care of some of these folks. And so 220 of those 275 will wind up in shelters like Souls Harbor, Watered Gardens, any of the particular groups that are, like, for example, taking care of homeless, that the homelessness was caused by domestic violence or whatever. We got groups out there that care, but there's still usually probably about 50 other people who might just simply be living in the woods or in a box or in a tent. So we got to continue to reach out to our brothers and sisters in need, see what we can try to do, and we got to try to fix the system how we can. Join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown. Have a great Sunday.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.